It is really my privilege to introduce to you Janeal White. I've gotten to know her a little bit month after month as I go to some of the meetings there at the Southeast Texas Coalition for the Homeless. I started to say the Regional Planning Committee because that's where the building is. But it's really nice that I get to introduce you to her this morning. Janeal White is the coordinator for the Southeast Texas Coalition for the Homeless. She is a certified family life educator and has been conducting research on homelessness, resilience, and dignity for more than 15 years. She has a master's degree in family studies from Lamar University and is currently a doctoral student at the Louisiana State University School of Social Work in Baton Rouge. Over the past 15 years, Janeal has worked for several nonprofits and ministries in Southeast Texas and Southwest Louisiana, and is currently on faculty at McNeese State University, where she is the internship coordinator and visiting lecturer for the Family Science program. She works to help students to become professionals who strengthen families through education, service, and advocacy. Janeal is originally from Port Arthur and now resides in Beaumont with her husband, son, and 3 rescue fur babies, including her precious purple pit bull, Lucky. She believes that she is going to change the world, and I believe that too. And now she will tell us how we can do it too. Please welcome Janeal White.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to join you today. I could talk about homelessness all day, every day, which my family will tell you is what I do. So to be able to share my information with you is such a privilege. So the title of my talk is Homeless but Not Hopeless. And so I am going to give you several pieces of information. Did it go? Nope. It's not going. Technology. Okay, can we change to the next slide? Great. So there's 4 topics that I'm going to touch on today. First, what is homelessness? Next, the many paths to serving. After that, getting out of God's way. And then finally, an invitation to a conversation for ministry. Next. So what is homelessness? We're going to start with a definition. So technically, homelessness is having no home or permanent place of residence. And so that looks many different ways. And so, you want to do the next one? And so this includes populations that are trading sex for housing, also staying with friends but not longer than 14 days. We know that as couch surfing or sofa surfing. Also, if they are individuals who are trafficked, and individuals who have physical, emotional, or financial abuse or threats of abuse. And because of this, they have no safe alternative place to stay. In 2019, according to the Housing and Urban Development point in time count, which happens in January of each year, in 2019, there were 567,715 individuals who were homeless throughout the country. And so we have to take this with a grain of salt because it's conducted, as Tali and Pastor Mike know, it's conducted in one 24-hour period in January. And we go out and we survey and count homeless individuals. Now, this is quite the feat to accomplish. And so we know that this is just an estimated guess. We know that this is a baseline and that there are many, many more people who are likely experiencing homelessness in all those different forms I mentioned. But this is a good baseline, and it gives us a way to compare from one year to the next. Next. Here in Southeast Texas, I have some numbers that are hot off the press. They were just finalized on Friday. So we had 249 homeless individuals here in Southeast Texas. And that includes Jefferson, Orange, and Hardin counties. Next, we had, of those 249, 34 of them were identified as chronically homeless. And that means that they had multiple episodes of homelessness over a 3-year period. It also means that they have a diagnosed disability of some kind. Next, we had 17 veterans that were identified. Then we had 22 unaccompanied youth. Is that where we are? Yep. And so unaccompanied youth means that they were between the ages of 18 and 24. And then lastly, the one that gets me is that we had 2 children under the age of 18. So, what causes homelessness? The big answer is a crisis of some kind. And so a crisis can look a lot of different ways. So it includes illnesses, divorce, loss of a job, natural disasters, deaths of a spouse, aging out of foster care, eviction, and domestic violence. These are all different crises that happen. And so when we don't have the resilience to respond to it, then it can lead to homelessness. A survey was done. Next slide. A survey was done to rank the reasons for homelessness for individuals, and this was conducted by I think it was the U.S. Council of Mayors, and they identified the top 5 reasons or causes of homelessness were, number 1, lack of affordable housing, 2, unemployment, 3, poverty, 4, mental illness, and 5, substance abuse. And then, next. But the number 1 reason for women was domestic violence. So now we know a little bit about what homelessness is and what causes homelessness. So hopefully the next question is, how can we prevent homelessness? And the answer is through resilience. Oops, can you back up? There we go, resilience. So I looked it up for everyone, and the definition is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties or toughness. Essentially, it's our ability to move on after a crisis. And so the next slide is resilience factors, and that just means these are things that contribute to us being able to bounce back after something big has happened in our lives. And so the 4 main areas are support systems, having an education of some kind, planning, the ability to plan ahead, and also having a sense of purpose. These 4 characteristics are commonly found in people who are able to bounce back once they experience homelessness. So how do we build resilience? How do we build resilience? The most common factor for children is to develop resilience by having at least one stable and committed relationship with a supportive parent, caregiver, or other adult. And this was found by the Center for Developing Children at Harvard. And this is really important because it tells us it's all about relationship. And here in the church, I feel like probably you've heard this many and many times, but it really does come back to relationship building. And so with children who are vulnerable, developing relationships, positive, healthy relationships with an adult figure is critical for them to develop resilience for later in life. Next, we have 4 resilience supports. And so the 4 resilience supports are areas of support that we get from different types of things. And so I'm going to give you some examples. So the first one is instrumental. And instrumental supports, these are the tangible things that we have available to us. And so these are the things that meet our primal need. So this would be food, clothing, a car, even a cell phone, medication, the things that we need to be able to function on a daily, on an ongoing basis. Next, we have companionship. Yes, next we have companionship. And this is who we spend our free time with. Who are we associating with in our leisure time if we're not at work or whatever it may be? Who are we spending our birthdays with? If we're sick, who do we call? We're also looking at who we spend that time with on holidays. And this is important because this is the beginning of that relationship building that I just mentioned. And so who we spend our time with as companions is an important factor that contributes to us becoming resilient. Next, we have informational support. And this is important because this is when we know where to turn if we need something. We know who to call. We know where to access resources in the community. Having the ability to know where to turn is a form of empowerment. And so this is a really powerful opportunity. And then lastly, we have social emotional support. And this is where we get our self-esteem from. This is when someone says, I believe in you, you can do this. And it empowers us. It empowers us to take control of our situation, empowers us to continue forward when perhaps we would have wanted to give up otherwise. And so we know, next slide, that the two most important supports that we can provide to people are information and social emotional support. Right? So it's helping people know where to turn so that they can advocate for themselves. They know who to call if they need food. They know who to go to if they need clothing. They know where to access medical care. Having the ability to advocate for themselves contributes to their resilience. And then the most important, next slide, is social emotional. It is critical. Having self-esteem, knowing that someone is in your corner. You know, if we're in a situation and we feel like everyone is against me, that doesn't feel good, right? And it causes us to retreat inward and we don't live into our potential. But also in situations when people are vulnerable because of poverty, especially, not having the knowledge that someone believes in you can be crippling. There are many types of pathways to serving the homeless population, many, many, many. And so the three that I'm going to mention are primal needs, relationship building, and advocacy. So when we think about homeless outreach, usually the first thing people think of is food pantry or handing out food. And that meets a primal need. Primal needs are food, clothing, shelter. And so many outreach programs do address these, and that's absolutely a wonderful way to reach out into the community. The second option is relationship building. And so again, this is when we're connecting. We're asking personal questions. We're getting to know them. We think of people as friends. And through building these relationships, we're able to empower others. And these would be things like mentoring programs, training programs that we offer maybe for job training, etc. And then lastly, we have advocacy. And advocacy work is when you're going out and you're interacting with maybe community organizations to promote or to request or to encourage or to support increasing services of different kinds. Maybe you see a need that the agencies don't see. Well, let's tell them about it. And so we're advocating for the needs of the individuals who can't advocate for themselves, or I like to think haven't yet learned how to advocate for themselves. Next. So another pathway to service is considering how to use God's gifts. And so we all have spiritual gifts, and I'm pretty certain y'all have talked about that probably at different points. Everyone is gifted with certain traits and characteristics that God has blessed us with. Let's honor that, and let's discern what those gifts are for us, and then utilize those gifts in partnership with each other. So I might be really great at planning activities and planning and coordinating things, but I might be really low in empathy, which is actually the case. But my husband is amazing at empathy, but can't plan an activity for anything. So you know what? If we partner together, we can create really powerful efforts so that we can touch the lives of other people for our benefit. And so even within this room, I would guess that there's so many gifts that are not yet tapped into. So maybe let's explore that and figure out what our gifts are and how we can partner together to make wonderful things happen for God's world. The next thing is to think outside the, quote, food pantry box, right? And so, as I mentioned at the beginning, usually the first thing churches think of is food pantry, right? Food pantry. But that's actually not a homelessness issue. That's a hunger issue. Homelessness is about not having somewhere to live, right? And so we need to think about that in context of what our church is looking to offer as outreach. And how are we going to engage people who truly have nowhere to live? There's lots of different programs in this community that y'all are part of, I see. And do wonderful, wonderful food ministries, food outreach. And that's so valuable, it's so important, because we need to help take care of those primal needs. But there's other needs that maybe aren't being met. How can we address those needs? Let's figure out what they are, and let's help to work towards them. Next. Awakening. So, years ago, gosh, probably 18 years ago at this point, I was in Mass one day, and one of the lines of one of the prayers that we prayed says, to respect the dignity of every human being. And before that, I was maybe like some of y'all, and I thought, homeless people are scary. I think someone mentioned that earlier. Homeless people are scary. They're always high. They're lazy. They just need to get a job. I have a job. Why don't they have a job? These were the thoughts that went through my mind. But yet I knew that that wasn't pleasing to God, and I wrestled with this for about a year. And then in Mass, I heard those words, respect the dignity of every human being. And I realized it wasn't about me. God didn't want me to judge. He didn't want me to make any sort of a value judgment. It was all about respecting everyone's dignity. Whether I liked what they were doing or not had absolutely nothing to do with it. But he demanded that I be respectful. And I jumped into that. My entire life changed and started focusing on the homeless population because it was the one I was most critical of. And I realized that was not what God wanted from me. And through that awakening, you can see where I am now. So next, we have my favorite Bible verse that supports the work that I do with the homeless in different capacities is Micah 6:8. And it says, "He has made it clear to you, mortal man, what is good and what the Lord is requiring from you, to act with justice, to treasure the Lord's gracious love, and to walk humbly in the company of your God." When we remember these 3 steps, it can change our lives. It changes our lives, and it changes the lives of those people around us. So, have y'all ever had an issue and you just kind of wrestled with it for a while, trying to figure out the answer, the solution? Well, I've done that plenty of times, and I came up with this really handy way to respond. Next slide. I decided I'm going to spar with it. I'm going to fight back. When I'm wrestling with a topic, we're just going to jump in. So next slide. So SPAR. Story, plan, action, and reflection. Story. I'm a qualitative researcher, which means that I gather stories from individuals and I analyze the words they've used, I analyze the sentence structures to find themes to help us know better how to serve different populations, specifically within the homeless community. And so I'm going to suggest that you find stories. You reach out. How do you find a story, right? You talk to people. You ask them, how's your day going? But then you build that relationship so that you can get information about their true needs. In the business world, we call it needs assessment. Here, I'm going to say, ask their story. Because once we've heard that authentic story, we will be able to identify with more clarity how we can provide support and how we can help them. Plan. Everyone has to have a plan, even those who might not have a spiritual gift for it. We do need to plan, but that's when you partner with someone else so that you can take those identified needs and figure out what are the options for how to address those needs. We're going to take action, and then lastly, we're going to reflect. We're going to evaluate it, so we're going to maybe look at some numbers to see are we addressing the right areas or aspects, but we're also going to reflect on what is God telling us about the work that we've done? What is the community telling us? What are the ways that I have grown or changed? These are all important parts when we take action in God's world. Next. I came across this prayer years ago, and it has just stuck with me. And it it's called the Vicari prayer, and Vicari means to call, being called. And so it says, Lord, let me know, no, I'm going to start that over. Lord, let me know clearly the work which you are calling me to do in life, and grant me every grace that I need to answer your call with courage and love and lasting dedication to your will. Such powerful words. It's all about being called. God may not be calling you into ministry as the head minister of a parish or a church, but maybe he's calling you to reach out to some homeless individuals or to some people who are vulnerable so that you can build those relationships and change their lives. And you'll change your life too. Next. This quote, I want y'all to remember this quote. I saw some of y'all taking pictures with cameras a second ago. Get your cameras out, because this one's a keeper. My favorite quote. After a tragedy, people just go on. They go on not because they don't care or are indifferent. They go on because they have hope and courage. That applies for this group today with what's gone on this past week in the life of your church. And this goes on with homeless individuals and those of us who reach out to them every day. It's not about not caring. It's not about a lack of empathy. It's about having hope and courage that we can make a difference. We can reach out and share the love of God with those who maybe have not experienced it yet. Next. And so now I'm going to take a couple of minutes and answer some questions. If anyone has questions about homelessness or about work that's being done in this community, I'm an open book. I will answer what you want to know.
Do you find causes here in Beaumont, say, heavy in one end than the other? In other words, just I've lost my jobs, or I've been imprisoned, or just don't know how to make money. You know, what do you think that the main cause is here in Beaumont?
Okay. So do I need to repeat the question, or did everyone hear it? Repeat it? Okay. The question is, have I seen that there's one specific cause that rises above the others in this area or leading to homelessness, correct? And so yes, actually the lack of affordable housing is the critical piece in the situation. So if we do math, I'm not good with math, but if we did math and we take minimum wage and we multiply it by 40 hours a week, which almost never happens because then they have to pay benefits, that doesn't make rent. So if we can't make rent, how are we going to pay for food? How are we going to pay for clothing for us and our children? How are we going to pay for a car to get to work? These are things that are issues for people living in poverty. And in this area, that's the biggest issue, is lack of affordable housing. They just can't afford that money. I think the average rent right now is like $900 for an apartment. That's a lot of minimum wage hours. It's just hard. Great question.
I saw on the news that they're trying to get people out from the freeway, not letting people go.
Her comment is that on the news she's been seeing that people are being pushed out from under the highways. And so the question is, where do they go? That is an excellent question. And I don't have an answer for you. In this area, they go into hiding, honestly, is where they go. Into the wooded areas around the town. People sleep in the treetops, they sleep in tents, they sleep in bushes, behind bushes, under bushes. It's about survival. And so if they can't be under a bridge, they're going to be somewhere. In Beaumont, we only have one shelter right now. And at the Salvation Army, there's a group that's actively working to try to get a second shelter going. I think for Point in Time Day, I think maybe there were 20 people staying at that shelter. We had over 200 homeless people in this region. A shelter that can house, I think they can house maybe 30 or 40, it's doing good, absolutely doing good, but it's not enough. And then I think the other piece is that not only do we need to have shelter, but that's a very temporary response. We also have to look at what are the services available in the community, what are the supports, what are those relationships looking like that are helping empower and encourage people to become part of the regular traditional domicile world. These are all questions, and they're great questions. I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer for you. Yes, ma'am.
There's a place I saw it on the news a while back. After the hurricane, they got damaged, but they got it repaired. It's in either Port Arthur, Nederland, somewhere in that area.
It's right
and
by
they have
the
all kinds of beds open, and only like 2 families in it, and they have lots of room. And what I didn't understand is this hand not know what this hand's doing, because we got a whole bunch of people living under the I-10 bridge there at MLK and downtown, but yet this place here has all these open beds for free. And see, the Salvation Army is $10 a night.
It is.
Plus, if you've had any type of felony, you're not allowed in there. If you have a pet, you're not allowed in there. So that makes it very difficult, because I deal with a lot of homeless people myself, because I work on Calder, and they come around wanting to know if they get in the shelter and all that. And so, they have to beg to get money to go stay, have somewhere to stay. And then a lot of them just give up and live under the bridges and stuff.
They do, yeah. And I believe the Salvation Army has a 3-night limit, and after that, you can't come back for a certain number of weeks or months or so, unless you enroll in their substance abuse program. And so one of the issues I've run into with individuals is, what if I don't have a substance abuse issue? Do I pretend so that I have somewhere to stay? Which of course I did not advocate for, but it's just another one of those questions. It's one of those needs. And by talking to people and hearing their stories, we're able to identify how can we plug in, what are those specialized situations that people have that maybe we can help respond to. And so I'm not sure exactly what shelter you're talking about. In Port Arthur, there's the Port Cities Rescue Mission. That may have been it. And so it is currently in operation. Right now, there's a women and children's shelter, and then they have a men's substance abuse shelter, I believe. They do have a lot more beds. I went and toured it a couple of months ago. They probably have 50 beds that are open, but the problem is they don't have funding to pay for the shelter, the lights and the water. They don't have enough money, they don't have funding to pay for any of that, so it sits dormant.
So couldn't people, instead of bringing this, that, and the other to them to help them to live there, to help pay a utility bill so that there could be lights, so that they could live somewhere that's actually a roof over their heads?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. That's definitely something that is worth considering. One of the other issues that is a reality is that there's no transportation between Beaumont and Port Arthur. So we may have, 150 homeless individuals here in Beaumont, but we can't bus, there is not currently a bus system that will take them to Port Arthur so that they can use those beds that might be open. So that's definitely another issue. Yes, ma'am.
Where would people in the community find our resources, or find the information to be able to pass on the information to them? With all the resources in the community, how do we find out the resources to be able to pass the information along to?
What a great question. So her question is, where does someone like y'all get information so that you can pass it on to people in the community who might need it? And so I have a couple of responses. The first is that through the Coalition for the Homeless, we have some, which Tolly has in his hand right there. Thank you, Tolly. We have some little, we call them the pocket pals. And so it's a list of, it's not exhaustive, but it has a lot of resources for the community for all three I live in Louisiana, all three counties. And so it's really helpful. It's laminated so the rain won't mess it up. They can just kind of roll it up and throw it in a pocket or a backpack. And so we find that they're really helpful. And so I can get more. If y'all would like some more for your church to have, absolutely we can get that.
And I do have some back on in the foyer there.
Okay, so help yourself on the way out, and then I'll get a supply for y'all so in the future you'll have it to go forward. And then the second part of that is everyone needs to know this number, 211. Everyone say that, 211.
211.
Right. So 211, if you aren't familiar, it's kind of like 911. When you have an emergency, you call them and they help you, right? They send out the ambulance or whatever. 211 is an information and referral hotline. So you call 211 and the trained 211 specialists ask you, what is your need? And you tell them, and then they go into the database and they tell you the resources available in this community to fit that need. So let's say I am a mom living in poverty and I need childcare so I can work. I call 211 and they say, oh, okay, here are 3 different programs in the community that might be able to help you. Here's their contact information. If they have additional details, they'll give that to you. And then you can go on and contact those agencies. So 211 is a great resource. My office is next door to them, so I hear about them all the time. I think over here we have.
Do most of the homeless have a cell phone?
They actually do.
Yeah.
They do. The question was, do most of the homeless have cell phones? And the answer is yes. And they do because there are a couple of programs, federal programs that pay for cell phone use. And I mean, they're cheap little phones, but it creates an opportunity to stay connected. There's actually been some drama lately about that because one of the vendors that is distributing the cell phones through that program is actually putting ads in it. And so the homeless people are having to watch the ads to be able to use the phone. So that it's a marketing technique, and there are kind of ethical issues related to that. But I'm not going to go further. But the answer is yes, most of them do have cell phones. Yes, ma'am.
I know there are homeless everywhere, but are there concentrated areas in Beaumont where the homeless kind of congregate, or where they tend to stay the most?
Sure. That's a great question. I'm trying to think of where the biggest area would be. Downtown has a lot of homeless individuals, and they, at night when businesses close, they'll sleep in the doorway, they'll sleep near or under the ramps that the trucks back up to drop off shipments and stuff. They'll sleep kind of under there. There's lots of places, little cubby holes that they find downtown. So that's probably the biggest area. But then there are pockets of wooded areas, and so you'll find homeless individuals there as well. Yes?
It's a two-part question. So as a congregation is trying to figure out how to engage either as a small group or an individual, can you tell us what need is really already being met that we don't need to worry about? And what is probably the least met need right now that a small group or individual is capable of helping meet?
Okay. So I would say that probably the need that has the most support right now in the community is the feeding programs. And so access to food isn't necessarily, if you're talking about strictly homeless issues, access to food isn't necessarily the top of that list. And so, I think the next answer would be, depending on if you're looking short-term or long-term. If you're looking long-term, I would say that the most effective thing to prevent homelessness in the future is to mentor and develop positive relationships with children. And so I was sharing with several people earlier that a church I worked with in Beaumont went through very much, it sounds like what y'all are going through right now, trying to discern where is God calling us. And so they took all of the information that I was able to give them, and they decided that working with homeless children to build their self-esteem would help prevent homelessness later on, which is true because we know that children who experience homelessness during childhood are more likely to experience homelessness again as an adult. And so they partnered with the school board to work with the school that had the most homeless children in the parish, and they partnered up a church member with each one of those homeless children. And they're 5 years into the program and they're still going strong. And so they worked with Big Brothers Big Sisters Lunch Buddy program. So once a week they have an adult who's developing a positive relationship with them, and we expect that that will help later on. So long term, that's my favorite one. But short term, I think that access to resources is probably a big need. We were talking about there's a shelter in one city, but the other city can get to it. How can we deal with that? I know that at regional planning, we're always working, trying to find a way to make that happen. But maybe there's options that church groups can do, either individually or together. And going along with that line, we are currently in the process of starting a homeless ministry alliance so that different churches can come together and talk about what they're doing. Share information so that all the other churches will know, so that A, we're not duplicating, but then B, maybe we see needs that we can't meet, but another church might be able to, and then we can collaborate. And so we're actively working on that, creating this opportunity, because there are so many churches who are doing little projects. So what if we knew what all of those projects were? So that's one of our goals. Awesome. Yes.
When it comes to relationship help, is there some kind of structured way that people are doing that, or are people pretty much on their own to just go find a homeless person and build a relationship?
Like adopt a homeless person. I think the answer varies. So oftentimes people will have an interaction with a homeless individual that will organically evolve into a relationship. And so, those are authentic relationships, and they're valid and they're wonderful. But some people may be like me, 15 years ago when I thought, they're scary. So then in that case, having an organized program to facilitate those connections might be helpful. And, that's something churches could look at. Did that answer your question? Okay. Yes,
I
ma'am.
have two questions. One is their cell phones, where do they have access to charging their cell phones?
That's a great question. You'll see a lot of extension cords at night downtown going, and one extension cord leads to a power strip, which leads to a power strip, leads to a power strip so that they can charge. They found a plug for a business maybe that is open at night, or not open, but they could access during the night and they'll plug in. That's when. Also the library, they go to the library during the day. If they go to Henry's place, they can plug in, I believe, there and charge while they're hanging out and doing other stuff. So there's a couple of options, but it is an issue.
The other thing is it mainly a male population on the homeless bill, or is it even
Oh, great question. I kind of skipped over that. Let's see. I can tell you what the number is actually. There were, for this region, the count that we just finished, there were 172 men and 75 women. Yes, sir.
One of those four sources I think you had there, one of the things said medications. How do they get the medications, or how do you know what to give, or how do they go about getting that stuff?
There are a couple of medical programs in the area that reach out to the homeless population. I know that Spindletop, who is a mental health program, they reach out, so they do a lot of advocacy and work and trying to keep people who have mental illness, help them with access to medications that they need. There are several smaller, they're not home health, but they're similar, where they're kind of independent entities that are medical based, and they have teams of nurses that go out and do kind of case management with people who have medical issues, especially long-term medical issues. Also, the VA has a homeless outreach team, and so they're always trying to engage and make sure that the veterans have the medication that they need. So those are some of the different paths.
I don't even know, is there a generic card for food? You just give one of them, they can go to any little hamburger place or something to get something to eat. Is there anything like that at all? Without having to say go buy one at Red Lobster or something like that,
I don't think there is that could be used at multiple. So you use Red Lobster as an example. That's part of their corporation owns several different stores. So if you had a gift card to that, then you could use it at those different stores. But if you're looking more at like fast food, there's not a card that could be used for McDonald's and Wendy's and Taco Bell. You would have to kind of get each one has their individual one, unless you went with like a Visa debit card. But then that can be used on anything, and then you have to process, what you think about that. Yes.
Okay, this is kind of a loaded question, but you shared about your your history and kind of how you came from judgment to others. I think one of the most common things that I've felt and seen in my experience is, people are scamming. They're taking advantage of the system. The beggars are making $60,000 a year with they're on the street taking the cash from people, or they're going in and buying drugs and alcohol. What percentage of people, homeless people in this community, would you estimate are scamming the system or taking advantage of people?
Wow. Great question. So, I would say that of the individuals that you will come across who appear to be homeless at different programs, like at Henry's or some other place, or in different encampments, I would say that probably they're not doing a whole lot of scamming. The issue comes that the people who are on the street corners are not often the homeless people who are out and about in the community. Does that answer your question?
I think so. Can you go into a little more detail about that? I don't want to put you on the spot, but that's just one of the common things I think that keeps people from helping is we're afraid to get taken advantage of.
Right, of course. Yeah, and I've been there. I'm right there. So I would say that.
Or maybe let me rephrase. What are some tips you could give us about not getting taken advantage of?
Oh, great. So I would say partnering with established programs like Henry's Place or some other place. They have great programs in place already. That they always need help and support. But that's a great way to kind of get in there. But also relationship building. Because if I have a relationship with you and I know your name and I know kind of your backstory, you're not going to scam me. And that is almost insulation for that kind of situation. I think oftentimes we give money to the people on the corners of the highways or whatever. We give money because we feel guilty. And we feel, as you were saying, we feel guilty because we might have financial resources and blessings that they don't have, and so we feel bad, so we give it to them, so we don't feel bad. Please don't ever give money to someone because you feel guilty. That's not what God intended, I don't think, for us. And so I would suggest to keep that in mind as you're discerning in any given situation. Is God wanting me to give money to this person? Or are they wanting me to engage in a conversation? Are they wanting me to develop a relationship? Is God wanting me to refer them and help them find resources in the community? These are other options to handing over money. Good answer?
Very good.
Yes, ma'am.
When I see a homeless person, if they say they're hungry, I don't care what they're gonna do with that money. I give it to them, and that's between them and the Lord. That's how I feel. I've always done that.
I agree.
And many people do exactly that. A lot of times people will have the little blessing bags in their car, with the snacks and the peanut butter crackers and the Vienna sausages and those kinds of things. And so that's another response that lots of people come up with, that they hand this to individuals. I will advocate, this is my soapbox now. If you do blessing bags, please do not put toiletries and food in the same bag. Please do not. The scent from the toiletries will infuse into the food, and the whole bag will be thrown away, without question. And please, just do it. Any other questions? Yes?
Do the homeless qualify for any welfare benefits?
Not automatically. If they have certain situational factors, perhaps. So if they're a veteran, then they could perhaps be eligible for funding, for assistance through the VA, or some grants even. If they have children under the age of 18, they could be eligible for funding to help provide for those children. If they have a disability, they can receive Medicaid or Medicare to help provide their medical expenses. But the vast majority are not eligible for assistance. Yes, ma'am. You had a question?
So if you're in an area where there's not much forest and you have nowhere else to go, where do you think you would find homeless?
That's a great question. God bless you. So I think the question was if there's an area that doesn't have a lot of forests, Where do homeless people go, right? Is that the question? Okay. And so I would say that probably they're going to look for buildings or structures that they can basically hide in. So maybe a shed in the backyard, maybe there's a house that's up for sale and no one's residing in it, so they're gonna go stay there for a few nights. It could be staying in a backyard. So, you know, once a family goes to sleep, there might be someone sleeping in the backyard that they don't know about. That's probably where they would go. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm a little confused on like the building relationships thing, because in reality, I've had food thrown back at me by a homeless person. So like I would go get them food and then throw it back at me. Wasn't too happy about that. But as far as that, like the building relationships, are you saying like to go to those places that you've named and they will pair you with someone, or is that just walk in there and say, hey, I want to talk to somebody? Like, how does that work?
Hey, I'm looking for a homeless person to hang out with.
I was just a little confused on how to go about starting that.
How to create a relationship.
Yeah.
Right, that's a great question. And so I would say that probably a great place to start is just being a volunteer for a program. You know, I know Tolly goes over to Henry's place, and so organically he's going to start to have conversations with people and to build relationships. And then over time, they will start to trust him, which they probably have already. And so then if they need something or they need to talk, now they have someone they can talk to. And they know he's going to advocate for them. They know they trust him, that he will be on their side. And so that's probably the easiest way to do it, is just get started volunteering with a program. I started volunteering with some other place 1,000 years ago in the soup kitchen, and I got to know a lot of people through there. My church has a homeless ministry program on Fridays. And then I got really involved with Habitat for Humanity, which doesn't work directly with homeless people, but they're helping to reduce poverty housing in the community. So through all of those, I was able to get to meet people and start to build relationships.
And I would add to that, just a reminder to talk to Tolly and Peggy. Peggy started a relationship with a homeless man. It all started with a muffin.
Yes,
right?
yes.
And
I was scared to death. And I even went back to my office and cried and called Chris when I gave it to him, because it just was so out of my comfort zone.
So talk to Peggy and Tolly. They've got a wonderful story about that, about how you can do it, even just with someone under a bridge somewhere.
Yes.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Are you familiar with a hand up? I think it's called. I saw that on TV just last week. Also about I don't know. It's a group of people who have in the Golden Triangle area helped like I think he said like 135 people, not by giving them stuff to help them to live while they live on the street, but to help them get a job, to help them get a house, and they've actually done like 135, but they've gotten houses and stuff, and it's called a hand up.
I've never heard of it, but I'm going to dig around and find it.
That would be a great connection.
Absolutely.
Put all the pieces together.
Definitely. I think you had a question.
This is just a do you think, I mean, some of the places have the soup kitchen for years. Do you think most of the homeless people know about that?
Oh, yeah.
I think so.
Definitely. Yeah, they talk. And so, you know, downtown, there is probably a food program every day of the week. Or no, there is a food program every day of the week. And so they talk to each other and make sure each other know about, you know, oh, hey, it's Thursday, go here for this. And Friday, go here for this. They definitely network. Yeah. With the caveat being, if they just moved here, then it may take a little while, but they will quickly be indoctrinated into this community. Yes, ma'am.
My question was kind of like, hand up, you know something else that can help the homeless find jobs?
Well, it's a great question.
Did we get that one?
It might be an area for y'all to explore. It could possibly be an opportunity, a gap in those services. There are programs for specific populations. So if you have a mental illness, they have programs specifically to help with that. I know at Spindletop they have caseworkers that are actively working on helping people to gain marketable skills and help them find employment. If you're registered with the VA, they have people who help with that. So there's pockets of people who have that kind of service, but if you don't fall into one of those pockets and you're not eligible, then I'm not sure of what would be available. Any questions? Okay. Well, I guess I'm done. Thank you so much for letting me join